You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell in North Carolina, and we are celebrating, not really celebrating. Twitter says don't celebrate this one because we're Coaster101, but it is our 100th podcast episode this week. So from the little podcast that started during the pandemic, we've now reached 100 episodes, so yay for us. But in honor of that momentous occasion, we had to bring back the founder of Coaster101 himself, John Stevenson, all the way in Tennessee. John, how are you?
Oh, I am great. Yeah, what a day indeed. What an accomplishment. And I have to give all thanks really goes to you for your continued dedication to this podcast and making it so great and making it so that people don't have to listen to my voice every week for 100 or so weeks. So thank you for all that you do. And yeah, I'm excited and honored to be here for this milestone episode.
Yes. And I started a new job like 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm starting to kind of like become more friendly with my coworkers, and they now find out that I have a podcast and they listen. And I'm like, well, if you like me on Teams and Zoom calls, you should try this thing where you can't see my face and hear my voice. You'll love it. It's wonderful. But this week on the podcast, way back, episode 13 of the podcast, we did an episode that was the Coaster101 Guide to Carowinds. And what we said in the show notes was, this week on the Coaster101 podcast, we kick off what we hope will be an ongoing series featuring close looks at the home parks of the Coaster101 team. So here we are, 87 episodes later, and we're going to get the second installment of the Coaster101 Guide 2 series. And it's going to be actually for one of John's home away from home parks, Six Flags Great America, which is located in Gurnee, Illinois. And John, let's dive right into it. What's your personal history going to Six Flags Great America, and why is it considered one of your home away from home parks?
Yeah, so I have a very close family who moved to the area about 10 minutes from the park in 2002. And so went there that year, fell in love with the park. Of course, I was already well into my coaster enthusiast career at that point. But it was at that point the largest park that I had been to. Fell in love with the park and have been going every year since then. Summer of 2014, I lived there for an internship, and so that was, of course, the year that Goliath opened. I worked literally right next to the parking lot, so you could hear the screams from the office. So I went there just about every day after work, and I've probably been to that park just about. It's tied with Dollywood and Great America, but I've spent many years there. I've seen the park transform and grow and go through these the many Six Flags eras that we've seen in the last 20 or so years. And yeah, it holds a very special place in my heart. It's a well-rounded park, and I always enjoy my time there.
I love it. And, if you're listening and you're not really super familiar with Six Flags Great America, it is in the kind of Chicago metro area and actually opened in 1976 as part of the Marriott Corporation. So everybody, you stay in their hotels whenever you travel, probably Courtyards, Fairfields. No, they used to be in theme parks, and they had what is now Six Flags Great America, but they also had what is now California's Great America. Both parks were both kind of the Great America theme parks. It was purchased it became a Six Flags park in 1984. The park was sold to Bally Manufacturing, who got their start kind of in pinball and arcade games and has kind of diversified into more other entertainment options, and it became a Six Flags park in 1984. So it's had quite the history over the years. Right now they boast 15 roller coasters currently operating, and there's another 8 that have opened and closed throughout the years that are now defunct, as the coaster enthusiasts say. So that's a really, really quick history. I'm going to save you from reading a Wikipedia article on podcast because that's just super boring. But John, you recently visited your home away from home park over the 4th of July, and let's hear a little bit about that visit. I mean, you got to see the new DC Universe area. You got to take a couple of spins on one of your favorite coasters, Max Force. But let's hear about that visit, and then we'll kind of dive into what makes this park so great.
Yeah, so I've kind of started a tradition over the last few years of going over the 4th, and because my family lives so close to the park, I can kind of just come and go. Of course, I've got a season pass, so I was there off and on for I guess 5 days in a row. Got to make the most of that Six Flags membership, and it was a really good time. I was surprised it wasn't too crowded, especially early in the day. That's really, I think, the one of the the best approaches to that park, and many others. The earlier you can get there, the better. So each day I was able to get a lot of rides in just those first 2 or 3 hours. But it was because it was the 4th of July. They were having their 4th of July Coke sponsored festival, fireworks every night for those 3 nights leading up to the 4th, and it was good. It's still, I think, like many other parks and just the industry as a whole, still dealing with staffing shortages and just the lingering effects of the still ongoing pandemic. So there were some rides that were closed, and some restaurants and shops and things like that were closed. But for the most part, thought the operations were really stellar. The employees seemed to be very enthusiastic, especially at the rides, like really moving guests through. I think just about everything had two train operations. I think Max Force was one of the few that did not. I know it's been having trouble running both of its trains this season, but for the most part, Max Force was reliable. There was only one. While I was there, there was only one really bout of downtime that it had. So it was a really fun. It's just such a fun, park. When you have a home park, you can go. Usually when I'm traveling, you're at a park and you really want to maximize your day and spend the most time there. And but at a park like this, you're so close, you can kind of just go for a couple hours, go at the end of the day. And it's a park that I just enjoy walking around. It's a really good, I think, park just to, a lot of the rides interact with close enough to the midway. You can just sit down and kind of watch the world go by. So it was a really fun few days. I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, and we visited the park together actually. Back in 2019, we went there, part of a big Coaster 101 group trip. When someone on the internet referred to us as the most normal looking group of coaster enthusiasts he's ever seen, which is a compliment. Whatever that means, I don't know. But when we visited in 2019, this was mere weeks before Max Force opened. And I know you touched on that a little bit, but because I haven't been there since it opened in on July 4th of 2019, what can you tell us about this SNS launch coaster that I've seen videos? It's actually on our TikTok channel, so shameless plug there. But this launch is insane, and according to RCDB, it somehow goes upside down 4 times, and the ride only takes 23 seconds. What can you tell us about Max Force?
I love it. I think I don't know if people just haven't ridden it, or maybe I'm an anomaly. I don't know, but I absolutely love this coaster. The launch is the fastest in North America as far as the acceleration goes, 0 to 78 in less than 2 seconds. I mean, the pace, of course, it's too short. It could go on forever and I would be totally content, but it is one of the most unconventional coasters as far as the elements. It goes directly into, there's a small, very small kind of airtime hill bump, I don't even know if you could call it that leads into the dog tongue element, which according to RCDB is the only coaster in the world to have that element. It's a double inverting, somewhat of a, I guess, a cobra roll boomerang element, sort of, but then it leads into the fastest inversion in the world at 60 miles an hour through the 0G roll. It is just it actually, they Six Flags website says it has 5 inversions. The dive loop at the end it's kind of kind of a two inversion element. It's kind of not. It's a stretch, but regardless of what you call it, it's a just an incredible ride. That launch, it's just I don't know. It's nothing like even some of the fastest coasters I've been on. You know, Top Thrill, Accelerator, Knott's Berry Farm. It is an incredible coaster, and I wish that more Six Flags and just more parks in general. I mean, the compressed air, you hear that boom after the train launches, and it's so fast. You see the train before you hear that the boom of the compressed air. It's a fantastic ride.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I remember way back, we could think about King's Dominion. The prototype of the compressed air launch was at Hypersonic XLC, and I somehow lucked out and got a ride on Hypersonic XLC during the 6 years it operated. I remember just that 0 to, you know, super fast
80.
excel. Yeah,
Yeah,
0 to 8. It was nuts, and haven't ridden anything like it since. But yeah, I'm really upset. I feel like I have that kind of luck when I go to a park. Like when we visited in 2019, it was built, but they were still building like the station and the entrance and things like that. And we didn't get to ride. You've obviously ridden multiple times, so kind of jealous of you,
yeah.
but it's going to be okay. Um, but in addition to Max Force, Six Flags Great America has 14 other roller coasters. You want to talk just some of your personal highlights, and again, they've got quite the impressive lineup here. They've got a handful of wooden coasters, a lot of good steel coasters. But what are some of your favorite roller coasters at Six Flags Great America?
Yeah, so I really do think it is an under I think it's an underrated park in the chain. It's got a very well balanced lineup, like you said. It's got a lot of history as well. So you've got I think Great America, one of the things that I like about Great America over the years is that it's kind of been a testing ground for the Six Flags chain. So obviously, Batman the Ride, the first of what is now Mini Mini, the first was built in at Great America and opened in '92, and its layout was um, kind of fit. It replaced um, Tidal Wave, which was a Schwarzkopf shuttle loop. So it was a very narrow track. I mean, the park is landlocked. So every ride that the park builds has to be fit either by removing something else or has to be really shoved into a very small plot of land. And so, Batman the Ride, of course, first of its kind. You've got Iron Wolf, which is no longer at the park. It's at Six Flags America now. As Firebird, it's a floorless sit-down coaster now, but so it was B&M's first coaster. You have American Eagle, which was I think the tallest wooden coaster at the time that it opened, the racing wooden coaster. Um, Demon, the Arrow, which was traditionally had two corkscrews, and then it was transformed. It was originally turn of the century, I believe, and then it was reborn as the Demon in the early '80s, in 1980, and they added two vertical loops to it. So it's just a really, and then of course you've got Goliath that opened in 2014, tallest, fastest wooden coaster at the time. Raging Bull, B&M's first hyper twister coaster. X Flight, one of the first, same year as Wild Eagle at Dollywood, North America's first. Um, B&M Wing Coaster, Wizard, of course, a classic. It's just it's a really interesting lineup of coasters, and it's always exciting. You know, of course, Max Force was the first SNS kind of 2.0 uh, compressed air launch coaster, and so it's just an exciting park because Six Flags really does seem to kind of test out new models and new types of attractions at the park.
Yeah, I do recall, and again, I'm someone who is not the world's biggest fan of the Six Flags chain, and I've admitted that several times in this podcast. So I apologize, and I get why people enjoy Six Flags. It's just not my cup of tea. Give me a Cedar Fair Park any day. But I remember visiting in 2019, and it didn't have that as much of a like Six Flags feel to me, if that makes sense. Like it is a clean, well kept park. The operations were good. The Snickers advertisements on the train, or the Takis, or whatever were advertising on the trains, they didn't seem as prevalent here. Um, One of the coasters I want to talk about that you didn't mention is Viper, which is a wooden
Mm.
coaster that opened in '95. I went into this with not a lot of expectations, and I recall just thoroughly enjoying Viper and my ride on it when we went as a group. It was super fun for a wooden coaster, and it didn't have too much of a rattle despite its age. So it was again, you get these names at Six Flags parks. Viper could be literally anything, but it is a mirror image, the original Cyclone at Coney Island's Astroland, and it was just, it was a good wooden coaster that again really complements that lineup of coasters at Six Flags Great America. But I remember you were at the park and you got kind of this posed this question on Instagram. You were looking for questions, and somebody asked you if you thought that American Eagle, which is their racing wooden coaster, would be benefited benefited by going under the RMC knife. Let's hear your thoughts on American Eagle on this podcast, and should it be RMC'd or Titan tracked or whatever we're going to call the verb of what GCI is doing over there these days.
Yeah, it's a question, it's a rumor that keeps circulating, and I think it's, should it happen versus will it happen? I th- I don't know. It would be interesting just to see the concept of what they could do with it, just kind of as a oh wow, that would be crazy. But as far as, again, it is a very historic coaster, and so, and it's still it's they've done a lot of retracking on it in the last few years. It is it's a fun it's still a fun ride. You still get some nice airtime, especially in the back. I mean, when they're actually running both trains and you have that racing element, it is which is not that often, at least when I've been at the park, but it's a fun ride, and it has it's a dying breed. So while I would be very interested to see what RMC could do with it, at the end of the day, it is essentially an out and back coaster. So I do wonder how much they could really do with it. So I think if there was anything that was going to be done, I would say continue to retrack it, let GCI take a look at it and see what they can do. I don't think we'll ever get the twisted colossus treatment. I think it will be. I hope it will continue to be a wooden coaster.
Okay. Well, as long as we don't rename it Abercrombie or Aeropostale, we're going to be okay. Or
Yeah,
Hollister.
no Abercrombie ads on the side. But now that you mentioned that, I haven't seen. I think hopefully those days are in the past, because I have not seen that in quite some time. The train wraps.
All right. Well, your lips to God's ears. Let's keep it that way in the Six Flags parks.
I'm a Six Flags fan. They're not perfect, but I don't know. I think it's just because I went to those much more as a kid than Cedar Fair Park, so I guess I have a soft spot for them, just the nostalgia of them all. But yeah, they're not perfect.
Well, I don't think anybody's really perfect, but it is what it is. I do want to. You did touch on train wraps, so I think that feels like a natural segue to go into Six Flags Great America's kind of new for 2022 themed area, which is the DC universe. I know this area used to be known as Yankee Harbor. There was some, a little bit of jumbled theming here. You had vertical velocity, or then you had some Batman themed rides. You had the Joker coaster, you had Batman, and then you had a swing and a hydro flume, like a log flume. But what does the transformation of this area into the DC, again, DC universe? I want to call it DC Super Friends, but I know that's not right. The DC universe, has that kind of improved this Yankee Harbor area of the park?
Yeah, I will say I was really impressed with it. I knew that it was happening. I wrote about it on the site, and I was like, okay, it'll be interesting. But I was really impressed with the commitment to the theme that the park did. I mean, it's definitely more than just slapping up some signs. I think they really there was some thought put into renaming the food stands and the thematic elements of these rides. And like you said, there was already some. I mean, it makes sense why they went with DC Universe and just doing a complete overlay. You did have Batman, you did have Joker, and you did have this Yankee Harbor. Personally, I think it would have been fun to just do a complete Gotham City because it kind of has that same vibe of kind of a seaside town, New England, New York, a little, New York vibes, but I understand wanting to incorporate other DC characters into it. So it was really nice. I didn't get a chance to eat at Steelworks Pub, which is the sit down restaurant, like Italian food in a bar. They were still working on the bar, the inside portion of it, but they did have the outside. So it's just a really, I'm kind of a traditionalist in that I want the original Great America lands that were themed to different parts of the country. I'm a purist in that regard, I guess, and I'd like them to stay that way forever. And but I understand times change, and they've got to incorporate these popular IPs into the park. So part of me is like, oh, I miss the Yankee Harbor theme and influence, but it's still there. And I think they did a good job of incorporating these characters. Aquaman Splashdown, the former Yankee Clipper log flume, which unfortunately was closed. That's where all the other water rides when I was there, which was a little unfortunate for middle of the summer, but I think they've got a couple of those open, at least one of the other log flume. But it's besides the point. The Flash, you know, uh, Intimate Impulse coaster. I mean, a lot of fun. So it's always been one of my favorite areas of the park. Like I said, just a great place to go and sit down. You can watch Batman, the Joker, now the flat vertical velocity. So it's a fun area of the park. I love the swings, even though I don't I don't ride the swings, the super villain swings. I would get sick in mere minutes, but it's just a fun area, and I'm really impressed. It just looks very clean. Uh, Fresh coats of paint on all the buildings. It's just I was really impressed.
Yes. Oh, I want to get into some of your like personal thoughts here because again, as a seasoned veteran of Six Flags Great America, you probably have some favorites, some not so favorites. So let's do a little bit of rapid fire. You can explain if you want to, but we'll try to keep it pretty concise. But we're gonna assume right now that Max Force is your favorite coaster at the park. Is that correct?
I would say it's tied with Goliath.
Okay, well that was going to be
Yeah,
my question. What is your favorite coaster at the park that is not Max Force and why? So Goliath, why?
it's. I mean, the pacing, the inverted stall, the drop, the underground tunnel, I mean, just that RMC airtime that you get, and just the complete unexpected places. It's just a. I mean, the fact that they were able to fit that coaster into the former side of Iron Wolf, which was not that large of a coaster. I mean, it's a spectacle. It's an incredible attraction.
I love it. Well, if not, what is your favorite non coaster attraction at Six Flags Great America?
Ooh, probably Skytrack Tower, which was closed when I was there. I'm not sure it's operated at all this season, but I just love viewing things from high up. So it's always fun to go and see the park from 300 plus feet.
That's
Observation
the
tower.
observation. Does it
Yeah,
rotate?
it does rotate. Yep.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
get a. Yep.
Yeah, it does say closed for season on the Six Flags website. So
Ah, okay. Yeah.
they've got a good kind of arrangement of what I'm going to call thrill flat rides. And do you have a favorite? Do you have the Condor or the Drop Tower or any of those that are those unique flat rides? Do you have a favorite flat ride that's not the Drop Tower?
And it probably is the drop tower just because I don't like spinning or flipping upside down over and over. So that pretty much takes out. just about all of them. I don't even know. I think I've ridden the carousel maybe once or twice. I just anything spinning is generally something I try to avoid. But yeah, giant drop is the one flat ride that I will typically ride when I'm at the park.
Perfect. What do you feel is Six Flags Great America's most overrated attraction?
So this is just general. This is actually personal. I think as far as how long the line is versus how good the ride is, I would have to say Superman, and that's just because I'm not a fan of flying coasters. It's just personal preference, not crazy about them. So unless I'm at the park with someone who wants to ride it or hasn't ridden it before, that's one that I usually skip.
Yeah, those B&M flyers, they're super fun, but I can honestly say the longest I've ever waited in line for a roller coaster was a Superman at Six Flags over Georgia. We waited through two breakdowns, and I think it was the first year it opened. So waited like 2.5 hours. I don't think I would ever do it again, but I do enjoy those flying coasters, but I can see especially why, you know, being that they exist, the same thing exists in New Jersey and
Yeah.
Georgia, and I'm sure other places. I'm sure it, could be considered overrated. But on the flip side, what do you feel is the park's most underrated attraction?
Mm, I think honestly, I think a lot of the coasters, like I too love Viper and don't I think I tweet every time I go to the park, this is an underrated coaster. Like it's just it's well taken care of, it's smooth, the airtime is great. I mean, it's obviously what it's modeled after for a reason. Um so I would say Viper. I would say Raging Bull is underrated. It's so unique. It's unlike. I mean, I don't believe there is any other B&M hyper twister coaster in the world. It's just a fun ride. The layout is so unique and so unexpected, and the final figure eight. Um, it's just a really fun ride, and probably one of my favorite B&M hypers. Let's see. What else? What else? I mean, Max Force. I think I just don't think enough people have ridden it to really to kind of figure out how great it is. So I think those, yeah, I would say Raging Bull, X Flight as well. I would say I think X Flight isn't the largest of the wing coasters, but the layout is tight, compact. It's well paced. I love the keyhole element that where you fly through the control tower. It's a fun ride. So I think it's a little underrated as well.
So basically, in your eyes, a lot of the park is very underrated and more people should go visit for sure.
And yes, I think so. At
Okay.
least once.
I love it. All right. Let's put your Imagineering hat on. What do you think is the next roller coaster at Six Flags Great America to close? And I mentioned there have been 8 roller coasters that no longer exist at the park. The double or the giant inverted boomerang, Deja Vu, Iron Wolf was moved, Raging Cajun was moved,
Both
Tidal
to
Wave.
six. Yeah, both of those were moved to Six Flags America. So if you want to ride two of these, you can go to Six Flags America.
Well, we got to give a real quick shout out to Iron Wolf, which was also Richie Rich's roller coaster that they said was at the Biltmore Estate, Nashville, North Carolina. And when I showed up there in February of 2020, there was no roller coaster, and I was deeply upset. But
Oh gosh.
so, right in the nostalgia feels, Richie Rich's
Mm.
roller coaster at the Biltmore Estate, where he had his own McDonald's. Um, but back to the question at hand, what do you think is the next roller coaster that unfortunately meets the heads to the great scrapyard in the sky?
I hate to even speak this into the universe because it's such a beloved attraction for so many, but I'm afraid just given its age, Demon is probably the one that will I don't think I hope that it's not in the next couple of seasons, but I think looking at the parks lineup, unless you have one that is if Six Flags does bring back this ride rotation and for there was a rumor for a while that V2 was going to be moved vertical velocity, which obviously is not happening anytime soon now with this retheme. Looking at it, I would have to say unless like the Sprocket Rockets kids coaster was removed, which I don't think is going to happen. Yeah, my unfortunately, I think it will be Demon. But again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope the park keeps it around for many years to come, especially now with California's Great America Days being numbered. Its sister coaster there will, unfortunately, I highly doubt will be relocated. So yeah, that's unfortunately my guess.
Are they going to take the theme song with it, or will that find a way to live on in the, the Fright Fest or Halloween or something like that? If
Okay,
the coaster goes, does the theme song have to go too?
okay, so that's one of my things I mentioned I really love about Great America is that I think that a lot of the workers there, and I don't know the number, and I don't know if this is even true, but it seems like there are people who've worked there for a really long time. And I think the park has done a good job, and this might just be because I go to this park more than any other Six Flags park. But I think the park has done a pretty good job of retaining some of its history. So Demon, they at some point, I don't know if it went away, but they've brought it back. The soundtrack of the ride. So it's this very 80s, very kind of retro now, kind of like a scary movie out of the 80s. The narration, the song, the lights, and I mean, when you ride it, it really does feel like kind of you step back into this early 80s amusement park vibe, I guess, that was so prevalent from when I wasn't alive back then, but what I envision it being like. So that's why it would be. And then you've got the rock work that was added when it was transformed into the Demon from turn of the century. So the vertical loops go through the rock work, and the drop into the double corkscrew is the Demon's mouth. It's just it's going to be so hard if and when it does close, because it's such a fun ride.
Yeah, I'm contemplating putting that audio at the back end of this podcast, but I also don't want to like use someone else's IP, so it's on YouTube somewhere. We'll put it in the show notes if we can find it.
Yeah.
Um, but John, I want to keep that Imagineering hat on. We've talked, before the podcast, and even when you were at the park, there is a giant plot of land that is currently occupied by two attractions, which would be Buccaneer Battle, which is not operating this season, as well as some go karts. And say what you want about go karts, for some reason people always, you know, the ones that still exist at parks, I feel like are constantly being used and are an upcharge attraction. Mainly because gas is like $8 or $6 a gallon now, probably in
Oh
Chicago.
yeah, yeah. I didn't
So
even think about that. Yeah, they do run on
um,
gas.
they do. So let's put your hat on. This is a sizable plot of land where Buccaneer Battle, which is one of those splash battle attractions where you can kind of get the onlookers wet. They can shoot water guns at you. Dollywood had one; they got rid of it. I know Legoland in Florida has one. But if you were to get rid of this splash battle and go karts located, what is the attraction you would add to Six Flags Great America to fully complement its lineup of attractions? Doesn't necessarily have to be a roller coaster. It could be a series of attractions, but you got a lot of space here. What are you going to build in that plot of land?
Yeah, so just for some context, that area where the go karts is now used to be a Looney Tunes themed area. Really nice. I was really sad to see it go, just because it really, I mean, you now have this giant plot of concrete in the middle of the park. I mean, you can see kind of the skyline of the park, so the coasters, which is cool, but for the most part, it's just very hot. It smells like gasoline. It's disgusting, and I think the go karts were located. Oh gosh, they were located where, um, kind of in the area where Max Force is now. It was actually removed for a water park expansion, where the what is now Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure was going to be moved from Kentucky Kingdom to Great America, and then ended up going to Six Flags Great Adventure. But anyway, so they moved the go karts to this area. Then Buccaneer Battle replaced Deja Vu, and so it's a very large plot of land in the middle of the park. And I think one gripe that you hear people say about the park is that the layout is a little it's kind of like an elongated circle, and then there's the offshoot of the Southwest Territory area. So you kind of have to commit of walking around the whole park. So this could also be a cut through, and link these two areas of the park. That would be County Fair, right, kind of like right where DC Universe begins, former Yankee Harbor, and then the County Fair area. So from a logistical standpoint, infrastructure, it would be great to just open those areas up. But as far as what attraction I would like, I think that given the park's history and excuse me, given the park's history is kind of that testing ground for new coasters. I'm a little bummed that Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger is opening at Six Flags Fiesta Texas, because it's the first B&M coaster at a Six Flags park since, I believe, since X-Flight in 2012. It's also the first dive coaster, B&M dive coaster, to open in the country since Valraven, maybe at
Yep.
Cedar Point. Yeah.
In the
So I
country,
think
Yukon Striker was after that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I am a little miffed that Great America did not get that coaster, but that is what I think would be perfect in that area, because one of the things that Great America is missing or needs more of, it's a it can get very, very crowded, and a lot of the rides at the park have limited capacity, like Max Force, when it's running only one 16-person train. Um, so it definitely, Joker as well. So it definitely needs a ride that is a people leader. And I think a B&M dive coaster, even if it wasn't, even if it wasn't giant, although I wish it would be, I wish it would pass the 200-foot mark, just to just so it breaks some kind of record, because that's their new coasters usually do. That is what I would build there in that space. I think it was more than enough space for a large dive coaster. Could also connect those two parts of the park. I think when I posed that idea, there was some pushback of it wouldn't be that good, it wouldn't be that great, yada yada. I definitely don't want a Wonder Woman's Lasso RMC single rail coaster. I think from a capacity standpoint, that would not be a smart move for the park. I think they need a high capacity coaster in that spot, and I think it would just continue, would further well, would round out the park well.
Okay, I love it. That's a solid choice, and I feel like we talked about Doctor Diabolical when we record this. I think today was the media day. It opens this coming weekend, which will be this past weekend when you're listening. Hey, the magic of podcast recording. It's like we're in a time machine. But I think Fiesta Texas is also kind of that proving ground of sorts. Six Flags kind of has two proving grounds. They've got Fiesta Texas and Great America. So I think that's, Fiesta Texas got their proving opportunity. And so I think next man up is Great America. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they can get one of those, they've got a nice relationship with S&S. Maybe we can get an Axis coaster. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be good. I'd be good with that too.
Well, maybe the capacity is not good, but whatever. Anyway, this is
yeah.
armchair Imagineering at the best. This is why people get paid a lot more money than we do to make decisions for theme parks. John, I gotta ask, what piece of advice would you give a first-time visitor to Six Flags Great America?
I would say get to the park early. Get to the park very early. I would say is up to an hour before. If you're really limited on time or want to do everything, just because you can get so much done in those first 2 hours, I would say try to start with Max Force, but don't wait there too long, because some days it will take a little while to open. So just be mindful of that. And if it looks like it's closed or you're not seeing much activity, hightail it back to Goliath. Ride as many times Goliath as you can to just start working your way back up. American Eagle, if it is going to run two trains, they will usually add a train later in the day. So it's not critical that you ride it then. I typically will kind of work my way back and from Goliath, once I get the number, because usually it'll be a walk on for the first few trains of the day, especially now that it's been open for, oh my gosh, 8 years. So hard to believe. So I'll usually go back and do V2, The Flash now, Batman, Joker, if that's your thing. It was a one and done for me. Um, again, like I said, Superman, I very rarely ride, but if that's one that you haven't ridden or you really want to, it's another one that's better to do. I guess it's better to do earlier in the day. Raging Bull has pretty good capacity, so it's never one that I rush to in the morning. X Flight, I would work my way, start at Goliath, and then just pick either direction and just work your way up front. The park has really begun to use single rider lines more often. Like when I was there, the last day that I was there, I was able to ride Max Force like 5 or 6 times, like back to back, because of the single rider line. So if you don't mind being separated from your party, it's a great thing early in the day. I will say after once there's more than 10 people in the single rider line, don't bother with it because there's only one train. You're going to wait a long time if you have a grouper that isn't, it, if they're not kind of letting single riders on anyway, even when there's not a single spot open. So I would say just only use it when there really isn't that long of a single rider line. Um, Goliath also has a single rider line. Not every day. It just depends on staff if they have someone if they have a grouper. What else? What else? Definitely don't miss Skytrack Tower if it's open. It's a great ride. If you need to escape the elements, whether that's extreme cold or extreme heat, I've been there for both. Um, Justice League Dark Ride is great. The Dark Knight coaster also gets a long line, so it's probably better to do that earlier in the day. It's fine. It's a Wild Mouse coaster. I think a terrible coaster to waste on one of my favorite films and favorite superheroes, but that's another podcast. I think that's it. I mean, I think it's just a lot of what you could apply to kind of strategies at other parks. Definitely just go to the back and work your way closer to the front.
Perfect. And the last question I'll ask, and I probably shouldn't ask this because again, I'm not cracking on Six Flags here. Their parks are not known necessarily for their culinary endeavors. But if you were to have one meal at Six Flags Great America, what would you eat?
I think if you're there and you're not rushing and you've got some time to kill, I would probably recommend going to JB's Sports Bar, because it's more of a sit down place. They've got food, beer, got some different, probably some of the more diverse offerings at let's see, JB's Barbecue and Sports Bar. So that's probably a good bet if you're looking for something just a little bit more higher, more upscale. Obviously, as upscale as you can get at a Six Flags. Another option would be the oh my gosh, the chicken place. It's one second.
Strutters.
Strutters, thank you. My brain was racking. I'm like thinking of Nashville hot chicken places. I was like, Cluckers. No, it's Strutters. Thank you. So if you're into they've got good chicken sandwiches and tenders. I would say that's kind of where Great America is lacking a little bit in the culinary department. I mean, I unashamedly will go to Johnny Rockets just because of nostalgia and uh, so it just really depends how much time you have as well. I mean, it's beyond that, everything is pretty much standard Six Flags fare. So funnel cakes, of course, are good, and they have had some food festivals before. They did have a food truck when I was there. A local food truck. Didn't get to try anything from there though. They had some interesting things on the menu. So um, yeah, nothing. Can't miss items is
I
what
hear
I've
you.
experienced.
That's all good. Before we wrap this up, any final thoughts on Six Flags Great America?
Yeah, so I think again, it's a Six Flags park. It is not for everyone, and I think my love for it really comes from just the amount of time that I've spent at it over the years. Again, living there for a summer and working next to the park. I worked for the tourism and convention intern for the tourism and convention bureau there in Lake County, and so I was able to work fairly closely with the park, and again, go almost every day that summer, and to the first media day that I ever went to for Coaster 101 was for X Flight at 2012, and so I just have so many core memories from this park and a lot of good times, and seen its highs and lows over the years, and it's just it's a good park. Again, it's kind of a slice into the American amusement park, and it kind of has a little bit of everything for everyone, and it's a good time. So I highly recommend, if you're in the area, definitely go, and if you're not in the area, make a trip and try some of those coasters like Max Force and Goliath that you can't get anywhere else.
I don't recommend flying into O'Hare though, but that's again another story for another episode.
Yeah, I just flew into O'Hare for the first time my last visit. I typically fly into Midway, and it was an experience. Southwest is using the international terminal now, so it's a very lots going on, and it's under construction. So yeah, that was my first ride of the trip, was navigating O'Hare.
Love it. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode and episode number 100 of the Coaster 101 podcast. By now, if you're listening to this podcast and don't realize that we have a website, you should probably figure that out. It is www.coaster101.com. Over the years, John has obviously written a lot of good things about Six Flags Great America, so all you have to do is type in Six Flags Great America in the search bar, or SFGAM. I'm sure it'll pop up. We love our acronyms at Coaster 101. But yeah, head to Coaster 101, check out those articles. We're also on all forms of social media at Coaster 101. So that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and any other place you can find social media. We are there at Coaster 101. If you're listening, you can hear the sound of my voice. Make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, leaving us 5-star reviews on iTunes and Spotify and all those other places, and telling your friends and going in weird internet comment sections and saying, hey, I listened to the Coaster 101 podcast. And they're going to be like, everybody's got a podcast. Why them? And you're going to be like, it's great. So that's a review that I'm just making up on my head. But whatever, it's all good. But yeah, keep the reviews and likes coming. It helps us get great guests when we have great guests. And we're working on some really good guests coming up in the not-so-distant future. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music, and we will talk to you all again soon. John, this has been fun. Let's do it again.